cash envelopes, the Saturday auction, and a community lending circle with no bank involved at all. These are 3 of the 15 money habits I've watched my own Amish neighbors in Lancaster County run for as long as I've known them. And not one of these 15 requires a credit card, a loan officer, or a single dollar of interest paid to anybody. Pull up a chair. I've lived next to Amish families for over 40 years now, close enough to watch how they actually handle money, rather than how outsiders assume they handle it. And here's the thing that surprised me most when I first paid attention. It isn't that they have less money worry, because they have less money. Plenty of these families run real farms, with real expenses, machinery, vet bills, school costs for a dozen children sometimes. It's that they've built an entire system designed so money worry almost never gets the chance to start in the first place, rather than scrambling to manage it after it already has. I want to walk you through 15 specific pieces of that system, the kind banks and credit card companies would rather you never think about too hard, because every single one of them works just as well sitting in your own kitchen as it does in a farmhouse in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and none of them require a single thing the rest of us don't already have access to. Let's start with the one that holds the whole system together. Number 1, the cash envelope. What financial planners call zero-based budgeting. The Amish have practiced for generations with a simpler name, the cash envelope. Long before Dave Ramsey taught this system to millions of Americans, Amish families in Pennsylvania Dutch country were already doing it this way. Every dollar that comes into an Amish household gets assigned to a labeled envelope the moment it arrives. Groceries, seed, harness repair, school supplies, church offering. And when an envelope is empty, spending in that category stops until more cash arrives. There's no 13th envelope marked miscellaneous that quietly absorbs every overspend. No overdraft, no minimum payment, no number on a screen that can creep into negative territory without you noticing. If you've ever opened a banking app and felt your stomach drop a little before the balance loaded, you already know exactly what the system is built to prevent, because cash in an envelope can't go negative. It runs out and then it's empty. And that's a feeling you notice immediately rather than 30 days later on a statement. Number 2, the barter economy for eggs and produce. Long before anyone called it bartering, it was simply how a community fed itself. A family with 6 laying hens and more eggs than they can eat trades a dozen for a neighbor's surplus tomatoes, or 3 dozen eggs for a quart of honey when the bees had a good year. Nobody pays grocery store markup for either item, and nobody touches a dollar at all. I've watched eggs, honey, canned goods, and garden surplus move through a single Amish neighborhood for an entire summer without a single cash transaction taking place. Just a running tally everyone keeps loosely in their head and settles eventually, usually with more food rather than money. What strikes me most is how little anyone keeps score. Nobody's tracking exact value the way you would in a retail transaction, because the relationship itself, knowing this neighbor will help you out again next month, is worth more than getting the trade exactly even today. Number 3, buying at public auction instead of retail. Amish households are fixtures at farm auctions, estate sales, and consignment sales. And not because they can't afford new. It's because a used cast iron stove, a draft horse, or a set of hand tools at auction routinely sells for a fraction of retail, sometimes 10 or 15 cents on the dollar for equipment that still has decades of use left in it. And the quality on older equipment frequently outlasts what's sold new today. Retail pricing assumes you're too rushed or too unaware to look elsewhere first. Auction buying assumes the opposite, and it rewards the patience to wait for the right sale instead of the nearest store. Number 4, a mending culture instead of a replacing culture. A torn shirt gets patched, not thrown out. A treadle sewing machine, no electricity required, sits in most Amish homes, specifically because clothing is meant to be repaired through multiple generations of wear, not discarded the first time a seam gives out. The math is simple. A patch costs a few cents in thread and 20 minutes of attention. A replacement costs the full price of the item all over again, plus a trip to buy it, plus the inconvenience of being without it in the meantime. This habit extends well past clothing too. Boots get resoled rather than replaced. A broken handle on a tool gets carved new from a piece of hickory, rather than the whole tool being thrown out for one part. Number 5, buying in bulk through a church district co-op. Individual families pool orders for flour, sugar, fabric, and animal feed, and purchase at wholesale volume directly from suppliers, splitting the load among a dozen households or more. The same wholesale discount a grocery store gets for buying a pallet at a time, ordinary families get access to simply by ordering together instead of separately, often saving 30 to 40% off retail on staples that get used year-round regardless. Number 6, the community lending circle. This is the one most people have never heard of, and it's the one I think about most. Rather than financing a barn, a new harness shop, or emergency medical costs through a bank loan, with compound interest quietly eating away at the principal for years, Amish communities frequently pool funds informally among church members, lending at no interest or low interest, repaid on a flexible schedule based on trust built over years of shared community life. This community lending circle functions like a collective emergency fund, one that's already fully stocked the day someone actually needs it. Some districts run formal mutual aid funds specifically for medical costs, where every household contributes a small amount regularly, so the fund is already sitting there, ready the day someone needs surgery or a hospital stay, rather than starting a collection after the fact. No credit check, no interest line eating into the principal for years, no collections call if a harvest comes in light one season. Just an agreement between people who plan on knowing each other for the rest of their lives, and who understand that a neighbor's hardship this year might be your own hardship the next, which tends to keep everyone a great deal more patient and a great deal more generous than a bank statement ever would. Number 7, making soap, candles, and cleaning supplies at home. Lye soap from rendered fat and wood ash, beeswax or tallow candles, vinegar and water cleaning solutions. Every one of these costs pennies in raw materials compared to what sits on a store shelf with a brand name and a markup attached. A batch of lye soap that yields a dozen bars might cost $2 or $3 total in materials, against $4 or $5 per bar at a store. The ingredients haven't changed in 200 years. Only the convenience of skipping the work has been sold back to us, at a premium most people never stop to calculate. Now, before we get to the second half of this list, I want you to notice something all 7 of these tricks have in common. None of them are about earning more money. Every single one is about needing less of it to begin with, which is a different kind of wealth than most financial advice ever talks about. What the FIRE community, the financial independence crowd, is just now discovering and writing books about, these Pennsylvania Dutch families figured out 300 years ago and simply never stopped doing. Number 8, the woodlot as a standing cash crop. A managed stand of timber on Amish-owned land isn't just heating fuel for the winter. It's a slow-growing financial asset that sits there appreciating whether you touch it or not. Selectively harvested hardwood sells to furniture makers and lumber mills for real money, sometimes thousands of dollars for a single mature black walnut, while smaller branches and offcuts heat the home, meaning the same acre of trees is simultaneously your heating bill and your savings account, with almost no ongoing cost beyond patience and the occasional afternoon of cutting. Number 9, raising and trading livestock instead of buying meat at retail price. A family raising hogs, chickens, or a milk cow isn't just feeding themselves. They're holding an asset that can be traded directly with a neighbor for labor, lumber, or other livestock, completely outside the retail meat counter and its markup. A pig raised through the summer on kitchen scraps and garden surplus, then traded for a winter's worth of split firewood, is 2 households solving 2 problems without either one spending $1 or setting foot in a store. The animal cost almost nothing beyond feed scraps that would have been thrown out anyway, and the firewood cost a neighbor an afternoon with a chainsaw he already owned. Compare that to buying pork at the grocery store and buying firewood from a delivery service, 2 separate cash transactions, both with someone else's profit margin built into the price. Number 10, the quilting and textile barter circle. Women in Amish communities have historically traded fabric scraps, finished quilts, and sewing labor among themselves, the same way the men trade lumber and livestock. A quilting bee isn't just a social gathering. It's an economy where skilled labor and material goods change hands without a single cash register involved. And a finished quilt that would retail for several $100s at a craft market gets produced through pooled time and shared material instead, with every woman walking away having both given and received something of real value. Number 11, the labor exchange, barn raisings, and harvest help. Rather than hiring a contractor at market rate, an entire community shows up to raise a barn frame in a single day. Sometimes 40 or 50 people working from sunrise to dusk. And that family returns the favor the next time a neighbor needs the same help. The labor itself is the currency, banked as goodwill rather than dollars. Nobody invoices anybody, and the barn goes up in a fraction of the time a hired crew would take, at none of the cost beyond feeding everyone a proper noon meal. Number 12, buying tools built to be repaired, not replaced. Hand tools, harness equipment, and even some farm machinery in Amish households are chosen specifically because every part can be repaired or rebuilt rather than discarded when one component fails. A cheap modern tool with a sealed motor or a proprietary part that's simply not sold separately is designed to be thrown away the moment it breaks. And most manufacturers know it, since a tool that lasts 40 years doesn't sell a replacement in year 5. A well-made hand tool from a foundry that still exists, or one passed down from a grandfather 40 years ago, is designed to outlive the person who bought it, and frequently does, getting handed down again with nothing more than a new handle or a fresh edge ground onto it. Number 13, the root cellar and the canning shelf as inflation insurance. A pantry stocked from your own garden doesn't care what happened to grocery prices this year. Whatever inflation does to a supermarket shelf between now and next spring, a basement lined with canned tomatoes and a root cellar full of potatoes, carrots, and squash is already paid for. Harvested months ago at the cost of seed, labor, and a few mason jars instead of whatever number shows up at checkout. A family that puts up 200 quarts of vegetables every autumn isn't just saving money on groceries, they've effectively locked in this year's prices for everything on that shelf. Regardless of what happens to the cost of food between now and the day the last jar gets opened next spring. Number 14, saving seed instead of buying it every spring. Heirloom varieties are selected specifically because they breed true, meaning a single packet of seed purchased once can produce a garden's worth of seed for every following year, indefinitely, as long as someone takes the time to dry and store it properly. Hybrid seeds sold by major agricultural companies frequently won't reproduce reliably from one generation to the next, which isn't an accident. It's a business model that requires you to buy new seed every single season, whether you want to or not. A single tomato can yield enough seed for dozens of plants the following year, and a family that's been saving the same bean variety for 3 generations is sitting on a seed bank that's never once cost them a trip to a store. Number 15, cash-only purchasing, full stop. No credit card, no financing plan, no buy now, pay later arrangement on anything ever, regardless of how reasonable the terms sound in the moment. If the cash in the envelope doesn't cover it, the purchase waits until it does. These practices aren't random either. They're woven into the Ordnung, the unwritten code that governs Amish community life. And that code exists precisely because a community that carries no debt to outside institutions answers to no outside institution. It's the least flashy item on this list, and it's the one underneath all the other 14, because every other trick on this list only works for a household that isn't quietly bleeding money to interest payments in the background every single month. My grandfather used to say that debt is the only kind of weather a man brings into his own house himself. And after watching these 15 habits play out for 40 years next door, I think he was onto something most of the country forgot somewhere along the way. None of this requires horses or suspenders or giving up electricity. It requires deciding that your money answers to you on a schedule you set instead of the other way around. And it requires building a few systems, an envelope, a relationship with your neighbors, a willingness to mend instead of replace, that do the deciding for you on the days your willpower runs thin. Pick 3 of these 15 and start there. You don't need a community of 100 families to start a lending circle with 2 or 3 people you trust. You don't need a woodlot to start mending instead of replacing. The system was never about the lifestyle. It was always about the principle underneath it. And that principle works in any kitchen in any town, regardless of what's parked in the driveway or running through the walls. Take care of what you've got, and it'll take care of you.